Good morning, everybody. My name is Frank Radis, and this is Native and Contextual Strategies online, YouTube, Facebook, OTT, mobile, and more. It's not exactly what our host Victor had laid out, because we have to say that some of the most important distribution of video content and, of course, metadata and the like comes from publications that live online. I'd like to introduce my panel from Forbes Media, Jessica Sibley, Peter Naylor from Hulu. I'm going out of order because I don't know what order they're in. Julie Hansen from Business Insider, Jesse Redness from Brave Ventures, and Linda Ong from Truth Co. So, let's start with online and native advertising and ways to sell advertising in the 21st century, and I want to go to you, Julie, to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Native is a topic we like a lot, actually, at Business Insider, because we think it makes a lot of sense and it works. It can work a lot across all categories, sorry. In particular, it seems to us it works very well in the business category, because so many products and services that businesses purchase are considered purchases. So learning a bit about them is more important in the case of your server than in the case of beverage with lunch. But in any event, we look at native, when it's done right, as a great service to the user and a great service to the advertiser. And done right means appropriately labeled, so there's no question of deceiving the reader. I just push back on the notion that that's the whole point of native advertising. We don't agree. We do think our readers are smart, and when they see something labeled sponsored content, they get it. And I don't think it's really any different from advertorials or other, kind of native formats in other media that have existed for many years. So when it's done right, and when the content is made as compelling and relevant as possible, I think it's a winner, winner, chicken dinner.
For a magazine or an online publication that's been around for 7 years, do you have the same kind of sort of intricate wall between advertising and editorial?
It's not that intricate, but it's firm. It's not negotiable. We certainly have many conversations between the sales and edit side, as in, what are you folks working on? Can we sponsor that? But we don't tell the editors what to write, and we don't tell the editors to look kindly upon our advertisers, and they would quit if we did. So.
Church and state. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind, Jessica, about sort of the. I think it's a struggle between editorial and advertising.
Yeah, for us, and this goes back 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, I'm VP of sales, and we were inundated with, proposals and client requests to really be part of the conversation from a thought leadership perspective. And our solution to that was a program that we launched. We originally called it Ad Voice, and we morphed it to Brand Voice. And we set up a team of producers and managing editors. They all come from the digital editorial side. They have backgrounds in journalism, and they report into sales. And we were able to launch a program that exists today, now 4 years later, where we've worked with over 70 partners, largely on the digital side, but really multi-platform. And this is translated into 6,000 posts, 20 million page views is a significant part of our ad revenues today. And we went at this from an experience of having the right support in-house team and having transparency from all sides. So transparency from a reader perspective, as Julie spoke to, it's the brand's voice. It's quality editorial, it's relevant editorial, and it's labeled by that advertiser, by that brand. So the brand is Fidelity Voice, or Xerox Voice, or IBM's Voice. And then, the back-end metrics in terms of transparency, so that with these running campaigns, you can see all of the data and analytics in terms of, really the reader scorecard. Who's reading, how they're discovering, where they're discovering, social shares, even taking it a step further to see who those influencers are, how they're tweeting, what their clout scores are. So we've been at this a long time in an aggressive way, and we think that we have leadership and a winning platform for advertisers, and it's been proven.
So I think I could do this panel and just throw out a buzzword, and then all of a sudden we'd have great conversation. So it could be contextual, and it could be, you know what I'm talking about. Just throw out one word at a time. We can start talking about it. But you actually make me think about viewability, and how does that play in your daily conversations? Length of time that people spend watching any type of advertising on your pages. Is that a conversation that you're having in your executive suite?
Is that for me, Frank?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We started talking about viewability before. Again, we started talking about native before it was called native over 4 years ago, and the same thing with viewability. So we were the first partner ever with Moat. They're fully embedded in our site, and it's something that we continue to work on and serve advertising needs against. It doesn't relate to what we do with brand voice because it's all viewable.
I want to show something that I think if you haven't seen it, you probably need to see it. When you talk about viewability, I had written a blog item many months ago about the importance of the first 5 seconds on a pre-roll. Yesterday, this appeared from Geico.
Don't thank me. Thank the savings.
You can't Geico ads because it's already.
I could actually show 5 or 6 more of these. Maybe I will show one more of them because they're just so darn entertaining.
Well, actually, let's talk about how that is native cross-platform now. So imagine that was actually a skit in SNL in which the SNL crew actually did that live. That's native. So I think the buzzword that we all been talking about native here is quite a misnomer that the entire industry has been jumping on just to try to drive the advertising revenues behind really smart integrated content. If you actually think about it, the very impetus of television is native advertising. I mean, the very beginning was all about bringing in brands to help fund the shows. So as you stated, this is nothing new. Native isn't anything new, but now it's all about how are things clearly labeled. I think Peter probably has a lot of insight from the IAB on how you properly label things, and now with the collision of social media and celebrities doing branded content cross-platform, what do you need to do in order to label what's native advertising versus what's pure entertainment versus what's advertorial? It's going to be interesting times. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the IAB would say you should label things so there's no mistake of what is content and what is paid. But I think that's a reasonable benchmark for someone like the IAB or any other trade association to set. But I think it really is about the publisher, and the publisher needs to know who their audience is. And I forget who said it, but the audience is not stupid. They can smell a rat if something's being pushed at them that doesn't belong in the environment. So there's plenty of examples of native gone wrong, but when done right, it's actually entertaining or informative or a service to the audience, and that's native done right. And it doesn't really matter what you call it as long as it fits within its contextually within its environment.
And Peter, it was Julie who said that the audience is really smart, because I think that's the #1 takeaway. And when it comes to native or any kind of contextual integration, I think that what's so fascinating from a cultural perspective is for the audience, for the viewers, and advertisers' marketing is actually content to them, like we just saw, and a programmer or a media company's content is actually marketing for them. So the most important thing is they know that, they get it, and if you respect that and not try to pretend that they won't know, then they'll reward you with their loyalty.
And we set out to do a study with IPG Media Labs where we tested and a whole host of different experiences and different case studies. And what we saw was that when you're exposed, or a reader or user is exposed to branded content on a publisher's site, a publisher as credible and authoritative as Forbes, all of the key metrics, the key lifts, like consideration, like intent, and even trust went up, and went up significantly.
I think Geico's earned a place where they can pull something like that off. I mean, they have a long legacy of doing really creative executions. I think it would be different if Travelers did it. It'd be like, oh, do you see this ad from Travelers? It's like, well, what are they doing? Like, they haven't earned the place to do it. Yeah. Geico, I think, is doing it, and they've earned it with the audience, they've had this established track record of doing creative work like that.
So it's authentic. Yeah. You know, it's what they do. It's what you would expect from them. They always inject humor. So again, it's really being authentic to your brand. I think is really key.
Yeah. Another great example during the Grammys. I don't know if everyone noticed Target and their 4-minute ad pod, in which instead of Target's being known and synonymous with great music in their spots, instead of just doing a brand new spot, they actually bought out an entire pod and streamed Imagine Dragons live from Vegas. I think probably 95% of viewers of the Grammys thought it was a live performance being brought to you by the Grammys, when in fact it was probably a co-collaboration with Target and the Grammys, bringing you an actual branded pod. And nobody knew it was branded until the very end, when the Target actually showed up in the lower right-hand side. They didn't try to sell you. They just wanted to bring you a great user experience that was completely seamless to the Grammys.
I think those are two great examples of people sort of taking a no excuses strategy to all the challenges that are going on in the marketplace right now. People won't watch past the first 5 seconds. Great, we'll make a spot and we'll make them watch the first 5 seconds and beyond. People won't watch a commercial break in a live show. We can make them watch a commercial break in a live show. So I think a lot of the innovation comes from not saying, well, that can't be done, but saying, how can we attack this problem?
A new study was released today that said that a 2014 study commissioned by Defi Media, 13 to 24-year-olds are watching more free online video on platforms like YouTube than television, largely because they find the online content much more relatable. Linda, talk to me a little bit about that, how it feels, how it sort of dovetails with the culture of why you do that, and our culture.
I'm not 100% aligned with that POV. I think that's part of the story. I think part of it is the content offering is itself maybe obviously more suitable to the viewing experience online. It's short bursts, things like that. But I think there's a lot of other stuff going on. One is there's just such a plethora at your fingertips, plethora of content literally at your fingertips that you can instantly access. And have you tried surfing on an iPad? It does not work. So, you know, television content is a really kind of quaint media in compared to the user experience of viewing content online. And so the other thing, and Julie and I were talking about this earlier, part of the problem with traditional media is as long as it still tends to put out product that looks very traditional, it's really going to alienate people who are viewing other forms of content online. So what traditional media needs to do is sort of let go of its preciousness and its conventional wisdom about what makes a good TV show or a good newscast, and really embrace new ways and experimentation. Again, they need to do the same thing that I was just saying before, is they need to have a no excuses policy. And instead of saying millennials won't watch television, which we know from Jimmy Fallon's experience is not true. He's brought more millennials to television than have ever been on late night. But
70% of people that actually watch Fallon and Kimmel are not watching it on television. They're actually watching it on all
I totally agree. But that show, if you strip out the social media component of Fallon, is not the same show.
Agreed.
So they created, for 50 years, the late night format was a desk and a chair.
Mm-hmm.
So he took a desk and a chair and added the audience, and now it became a different show. So, how many other shows, 99% of traditional television content is doing a show and adding on social media, as opposed to having social media integrated to the process. Yeah. So I think that's really the problem, that you're asking people to come to an old medium that's behaving as an old medium. If it starts behaving as a new medium, you can get new people.
What's funny is at Hulu, we're observing that viewing is happening 24/7 consistently. And if you look at Nielsen ratings, you'll see dips on, say, Friday or Saturday. And it's not because people don't want to watch something. It's because what they're being offered isn't watchable. When we see consistent viewing 24/7 at Hulu, it means no, we have such an abundance of choice that they're happy to view it. They're just opting in.
And it's easier to find.
It's easier to find. It's discoverable. And the other thing that's really interesting about a VOD environment is it is lean forward, and you're choosing what you want to watch, and that cognitive dissonance results in a really interesting phenomenon. When you choose something, you really pay attention to make sure you made the right choice. It's a very much of an engagement mechanism, the fact that they're choosing it, as opposed to just turning on a device and something is on. Like, they have to go in and choose, and then they pay attention to make sure they made the right choice. And then the other thing that's great about that is, in a VOD environment, the audience is less likely to multitask because of that whole process.
Yeah.
Well, clearly Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Google Plus, they all seem like the holy grail right now. They all have different types of advertising models. Tell us a little bit about that, and what the competitive landscape is for you, Peter.
Well, it's funny, we have a couple different audiences and obviously two big revenue streams. One is a subscription revenue stream, and the other is advertising. So for subscribers, we're definitely competing with Netflix. But for advertisers, it obviously doesn't come up. I mean, for advertisers, not only am I competing with the quote-unquote TV.coms who have their own apps and their own TV everywhere efforts, but increasingly I'm competing with people like Facebook, who have arguably an inferior ad model, but a superior reach and a superior use of data. We've got superior content and a superior ad model, and I got to keep growing my scale. Everyone's got their strengths and their opportunities to improve, of course. YouTube, they've taken UGC and dressed it up with a wonderful ad model as well, and wonderful data. So there's a lot of different competition. When it comes to Amazon and Netflix and competing for those subscribers, we're really going to go after it with original content. We do have an abundance of acquired content from broadcast cable and other sources, but originals, as that content becomes available in more places, we know we're going to have to continue to differentiate with originals. So we're taking big swings.
Tell us, I hate to interrupt. Tell us about the big Stephen King project, because I know it's out there, but it's
that's probably our biggest swing that we're going to take with originals. Stephen King novel called 11/22/63. It's about a modern-day time traveler who goes back to upset the assassination of JFK. It's going to be produced by J.J. Abrams, and it's going to star James Franco. So you just talk about all those elements, and it's going to be a big show. And I'll call it a show. And that's the kind of thing we need to do to drive engagement, subscriptions, and it'll be commercially supported. We're going to film it with conventional breaks. So we know that we're going to serve both sides of the house there. A couple other things real quickly. We're doing a half-hour comedy produced by Amy Poehler, doing a half-hour comedy produced by Jason Reitman, and we too are paying attention to YouTube talent because they've got these amazing subscribers. Freddie Wong is someone we're working with. He's best known for Video Game High School. He's got 7 million followers. If you can take a fraction of those followers and have them come over and watch the content on Hulu, that's a win. So we're experimenting with that as well.
Let me ask you a question, Julie. You guys, I've been spending a lot of time looking at what you have on Facebook, and quite honestly, the how-to videos that I've been watching are just fascinating. And yeah, I'm stalking. We talked on the phone about your combination of journalism and video journalism. Talk to me a little bit about that and your philosophy at your online site.
Video is hard, and I think we've worked really hard at getting better at it over the past few years. We started out doing what we call bad CNBC, where you have bad talent sitting around a bad table with bad production values, boring everyone to tears. It didn't go very well.
I got it.
And then, so we kept experimenting, both with form factor and talent and settings, and kind of figured a few things that work. The how-tos absolutely work. We have more videos. We could be Khan Academy with our Excel how-tos, and they're fabulous, actually. You need to know how to do a pivot table, something I couldn't quite master in business school. Like, we've got you covered. So how-tos work. Explainers work really well. Why do we get the common cold, and what can we do about it? That kind of a thing. What's great is we're very aware that in a business setting, this is, I guess, a little bit special. Maybe you have your sound turned down. Maybe you can't benefit from hearing the sound because you should watch a video at work. So a lot of our explainers have text and graphics that will show you the gist of the story without you having to hear it. Great interviews work. Barbara Corcoran is also always great in front of a camera, or Richard Branson, or folks like that. And then there's a few other genres we figured out that work, but bad CNBC does not work, and so we rarely do that anymore.
Everyone tried to make television work online in the very beginning, and magazines and newspapers tried to make magazines and newspapers work online. Jesse, talk to me a little bit about sort of where we are and what we're looking at down the road when it comes to these different types of experiences and environments.
Yeah, so we've been actually tracking the marketplace, and let's talk a little bit about OTT and what that really means for a little bit. We've started a series that we're literally calling, "Oh my God, what the fuck OTT?" And what we mean by OTT is not over the top. We're actually talking about over the traditional. So it's about over the traditional ways of business models, of distribution, of syndication, of the platforms and the screens in which you're telling story on and engaging people on. So as Peter is mentioning who he's bringing in for certain shows that they're developing, Freddie Wong, one of the biggest points of bringing somebody like that in is the actual distribution platform that he has natively to who he has across social, being one of his biggest marketing assets. Hulu having a couple $100 million, now putting together a pretty strong marketing campaign, doesn't have to rely so much on traditional spots and dots to get eyeballs. He's relying on his talent now to basically push out across social medium and platform to help tell that story, bring people across natively from literally this screen back to this screen to start watching, and then maybe eventually casting up to the main screen. So, to speak to your point, I think that as we're looking at what's going to work moving forward, there is no model moving forward, because everything it's like a greenfield opportunity in which you can prove out and build whatever you need to build. It's all about whether or not you've got great story to tell, great talent, a smart distribution play, smart revenue model behind it, and whether that's advertising, subscription, organic, native, ad integration into the content you're co-creating with brands. The future is unwritten right now, and I think that's what's really so exciting about this particular time in television history, is that it's being completely redefined right now. In the traditional term television and storytelling, television was literally to view from afar, like a box from 15 feet away. That's not applicable to anything we're doing right now in our everyday lives. So how you're leveraging magazine, out-of-home billboards, mobile, tablet, social platform, all ties together in a much larger brand play of engaging audience wherever they are, on whatever platform you need to be on.
I don't think people, there's so much talk about the digital placement, that quite honestly you still know that television has this gigantic reach, and the frequency of television as a I'm not defending it, I'm just making a point. It is huge, and it's sort of the holy grail. But I get off point. Linda and I worked together at on projects at Univision, which is probably the biggest American Spanish language television network around, except for except for in Mexico.
One of the biggest American.
Yeah, certainly American. And so Linda being the expert on cultural relevance, one of the conversations that came up in all of our talks was about the number of Hispanics who owns telephones, who own mobile phones, and how many of those mobile phones are smartphones, and how much of the time they spend on those smartphones. Brings into the conversation about the cultural relevance there, and also about mobile itself, which is so gigantic and important.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking about this as you were talking. One of the paradigm shifts, and we've seen a great paradigm shift from, I love the OTT. I'm going to steal that, but I'll give you credit.
Steal it.
But,
I like that, by the way, too.
Is that at Jesse Redden?
Yeah.
But one of the big paradigm shifts, we call it the new world of television. The new world of television, whereas before, television was the hearth, you would view it from afar, you would gather your family together because it was one of the only primary ways that people could get the same entertainment at the same time. Now what you see, I'll borrow your phone, television content, and with television I mean content that's on video, no matter what platform or screen you're looking at it, is essentially now the most personal medium that we have. And if you have been on a plane lately and you walk to the bathroom, you see everybody's on their own device except for the poor schmuck who's got to watch the Ben Affleck movie. But, it's so personal, and I think to your point, Peter, what that means is that relationship, that commitment to viewing is much more intimate than it ever has been, because you are the only person at that time watching that image, right? Even though there might be millions watching on other devices, you're the only one on that device. So the whole paradigm is different, and the way advertising communicates has to be different. So the mobile, the mobile usage is A, part of lifestyle, B, part of, with Hispanics do over-index in mobile. I believe they're leading the way, actually. I don't think that it's because they're behind, and traditionally in culture they have lagged the general market. I think they're leading the general market. So if you're interested in mobile, you should definitely figure out they are the earliest adopters of mobile. And a lot of them don't have internet at home or don't have computers at home. And certainly a lot of them don't have televisions when they're millennials. So mobile is an area to really understand what that relationship, that dynamic between the viewer and the content is, and just think of it as a relationship. It is not about just watching something.
I think that's kind of interesting. I was just sitting here going through what is the difference between commitment to view and an appointment to view. And it's cultural. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Yes.
That's a great question. I think that from our perspective, when you have more choices, again, to Peter's point, you make them more consciously, you make them more deliberately. We talked about the audience being smarter than ever. You also have millennials, and as a generation, that are the most educated generation this planet has ever seen. So you have people who are not idly watching. And how many of you have more things? Raise your hand if you have more things on your DVR or your queue than you could ever possibly humanly watch, right? So your incentive to sample just got really low. Right? You're going to wait until you know a show is worth your time to click that button, or to make the commitment to hunt it down. So the way people make their choices has completely changed.
Peter, let me ask you a question, because I'm fascinated by this. And do you compete with cable?
I think we're more of a complement to cable. Hulu is really focused on entertainment, not so much news and sports. We're focused on on-demand viewing as opposed to live streaming. We know that a lot of our subscribers and just the free users are treating us, they're TV lovers, right? I mean, I don't think people who subscribe to Hulu are anything but TV lovers. The truth is they're probably time-starved and they're more appointment-oriented. So if anything, they're probably light TV viewers, which makes them a great, to borrow a phrase, day part for advertisers to target, because they're probably going to have a hard time to find them in a cable environment. So I think by and large, we're more complementary than competitive.
So I actually want to ask the three people on the panel.
And Jesse probably has an opinion. I mean, you spent.
Well, I was actually.
you probably have.
I was going to get to the all three of you. I have a question that
Jesse spent a lot of time at NBC Universal at USA. You probably have a point of view on this.
Yeah. You guys are the new cable. I think that's what the point is, and you may not be able to say it, but I'll say it. Essentially, I am one of those paying subscribers, and I use Hulu way more than I actually surf around for the 500 channels I actually pay $200 a month for. So if I had the opportunity, I would ditch about $100 of that bill just to give $8.99 over to Hulu plus a few other platforms to get all the content.
Well, that's what makes Sling TV so interesting.
Yeah.
The audience will be able to, one way or another, be able to a la carte their way to a package that's more to their needs.
Yeah. And that's exactly how the cable industry was launched. It was launched out of need. It was licensing content at first, building up audience, and then doing its own original stuff.
Can I ask the panel a question on this? I'm curious of your thoughts or experiences. How much of the current sort of dichotomy between the television experience and the OTT experience is driven by just how sucky the interfaces are by cable networks? Because I can't even watch on demand anymore. I want it, it takes 10 times longer, is so much of a commitment of time, and it's so frustrating to just even find the shows you want on television. It is so much easier.
It's so much fun to watch a kid try to do that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's like
they can't believe.
It feels analog to them, right? So I'm just curious, is that a behavioral thing in your opinion, or do you think is the technology right now on television a barrier, and will smart TVs change that? Just asking.
I think they're all the cable providers are trying to figure it out. You see the rise of voice command. I mean, if that can get elegant, it'll make discoverability so much easier.
I mean, even the Amazon interface is horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah, you have to you're dealing with a grid. A grid is still a grid no matter where you go. So if you look at the traditional programming guide, it's an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And so now all they've done with a lot of these things is they filled in the boxes with pretty pictures. That's all they've done. You go to Roku, you've got a 9 block of the top channels. That's all you have to choose from.
Apple TV has it.
Well, all smart TV. I mean, if you buy a Samsung smart TV, or you have a Chromecast, or you have any one of those. I mean, I actually travel using my Chromecast. So I plant myself in a hotel room at the end of the day, and I stick the Chromecast into the USB port or into the HDMI port. Now I'm watching everything that I've got, not using the Sling, which, by the way, I think is a really cool technology, not using Sling, but using a cloud somewhere.
Yeah.
Here's a question that I wanted to ask everybody about demo. In traditional television, your primetime demo is 18 to 49, and then you've got your news demo, which is 25 to 54. And all of us who spend money know who's really got the money. It's not the 18-year-old kid, regardless of how rich his parents are. So does demo matter at all today, aside from in that marketplace? Linda, let's start with you.
Well, demo matters if you care about growth. And so the news industry is having a terrible time right now because all of their revenue, at least on television news, I can't speak, Julie, and Jessica for print or digital, but for television news, it's all tied up in pharma. And so the goal for them, and those people are unfortunately literally dying, the audience, so they have a real issue because if they don't think about demo and they don't think about creating new kinds of content for a younger audience, they're really just, it's what I call AOL dial-up. It's just chasing the money where it is today until it just runs out.
Yeah.
I think for us, for Forbes being a 97-year-old legacy brand, demo is critical for us. And to have the legacy print-based and to really make the leaps and the jumps and the changes and the innovations that we've made in our business has paid off significantly with regards to our demo. So opening up our walls, being able to capture a mobile audience, 46% are coming to Forbes through mobile, and they're young, and that's great for us. We've been a brand that stood for, what we call free markets or entrepreneurial capitalism, and really what that means is writing about and profiling, who are the disruptors, who are the change agents, who are the leaders, who are those that are running the hottest startups? And excitingly for our brand, that's what readers are craving. That's who they want to read about. And these are largely millennials, and they're women. And, you know, that's really changed our demo, our profile, not only in terms of who, you know, we're writing about, the people that we're putting on our covers, but who then is engaging with our brand. So, you know, we've seen our age demographics, whether you look at it on our print-based product or even through mobile and digital and social, our age has gone down and our economic indicators have gone up. So really reaching the upper echelon, the real influencers, the real people, maybe not the 18-year-olds without money, but really the ones that are, you know, in our under 30 list, for example, as a great reminder of what all of us didn't do in our 20s, who are really, you know, who are really leading the charge here. So that's critically important to us and very much important to, you know, the audiences that we reach, and then the advertisers who want to speak to them and ultimately put out content that they will further explore and then share.
Jessica, how does that play in your ecosystem?
Julie.
Julie. Julie, I'm sorry. Gosh, I did that.
Yeah, well, look, I think marketers care very much about demographics, maybe even psychographics too. So we have to care. But also, the same piece of content doesn't speak to all audiences, you know. We're huge fans of the folks at Live Science, ASAP Science on Facebook. You know, they have this great following. They do these fabulous science videos that are all hand-drawn. It's one of the few pieces of content I can think of that truly appeals to everybody. My kids love it, grown-ups love it, but how many pieces of content can you say that of? You know, so I think the demographics determine what you write and then whom you attract, and that matters a lot.
Yeah, GE's been trying things like that also and sending them out as small pieces, and they're really interesting. But it brings up a point, because we're getting close to the time where I'd like to throw it out to the audience. It brings up a point with you, Linda, and then I'd like to end with you, Jessica. Jessica, God, why do I have that in my brain? With you, Jesse. That's what it is. That's what it was. Okay, that's what it was.
It's reasonable.
Too many J's on this panel. Geez, there's tons of them. So, Linda, let's talk a little bit about the sort of, again, there's now a new Holy Grail, and the new Holy Grail that you walk into everybody's office, and the first thing that comes out of their mouth is millennials. It's the very first thing that everyone talks about these days. So, tell me about why because what about all the other generations? The one that preceded it, the one that's coming up behind it?
No, that's a great question. How many of you self-identify as Gen X? Just curious. Okay, so the sad news is you're statistically insignificant, which is why nobody talks about it, which is a great, by the way, underserved market, because it's, you know, I don't know the numbers, but there are millions of them. But just compared to the boomers, which are giant, and compared to the millennials, which are the children largely of the boomers and Gen Xers, who is giant. So just in terms of numeric existence, it's statistically not a market that is as scalable as boomers and millennials. However, the thing that I do a lot of evangelizing about millennials and how to think like a millennial and embrace them, because there's so much, you know, this boomer pushback and this kind of generational conflict, which is kind of ridiculous. But really the issue is millennials influence everybody. And, you know, probably there are more people on Facebook now because of millennials than because they just found it on their own. They are the voice, they're the loudspeaker for where this culture is going. If you want to see what everyone will be adopting in a year or 2 years or 5 years, they're doing it now. And because of social media, their voice is amplified more than ever, you know, any other generation before. More changes happened in the last 5 years than happened in media, than happened in the previous 50, because the rate is exponentially higher. So it's really important. A lot of times when I talk to people about millennials, I get the pushback on demo of that's not our audience. It's like, well, is it total market your audience? Because if it is, you need to be understanding where the growth is coming from and who's leading that.
Yeah, that's always the weirdest objection. It's like, oh, that's not my
our
market.
Audience. Yeah.
Because if Fidelity said, oh, I want to buy adults 35 plus because they have all the money, it's like, well, you just ignored all the dot-com billionaires.
Exactly.
Two questions are so related, because do demos matter? What they do is kind of a blunt starting point,
Yeah.
but then you got to get smart about
Right.
who people are and their mindset.
Well, the other thing is, I do a lot of speaking for the travel industry, and they're all scratching their heads because they're saying we can't get millennials to book hotel rooms because they want to be at Airbnb, and it's like, and then they said, well, we don't want to market to them because they don't have any money. It's like, yeah, but their parents do, and if you've been in a family that has a millennial, who has the influence over deciding where you're going on vacation in the family? It is the millennials, because remember, the boomers, their parents are the helicoptering ones that just want to coddle them and make them happy. So if a kid says, my son just said, I want to spend Christmas in Cuba. He's 19 years old. I'm like, yeah, let's go. So, it's not about, if you chase the money, you will lose. You have to chase the influence.
So I'm going to take my Uber car back to my Airbnb and order some Seamless right after this panel.
Snapchat me on the way.
And Peter, you touched on it as well. There isn't a single agency out there right now that is only solely trading on demo. So the importance of psychographic targeting, behavioral, whatnot, that's the secret sauce that if you're an agency out there and you're buying and trading solely on demo, you're fucking dead. You're dead in the water right now.
Well, and demo was a census statistic, right? Yeah. Demo came at a time when there weren't a lot of ways to organize the information. There wasn't data mining traditionally in media, so people just had to cut wide swaths.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing for ethnicity.
So I'm seeing, and you correct anybody on the panel if you see this happening too. It seems to me like the networks and a lot of the big sellers are starting to think more like that, less about. I'm selling to 18. I expected a good conversation about that. I didn't expect a different panel, but I think that that's a lesson that's been learned by everybody. I do want to end on one important point that Jesse and I keep talking about all the time, whatever country we happen to be in, and that is sort of the center of everything that we're talking about. Everything. It's about the quality of the storytelling that actually you are trying to sell, whatever that is you're selling. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, and I think everyone is going to have an opinion on that, and I touched on it a little bit earlier. It's just the importance of the art form of storytelling is still the focal aspect of what happens here, and a lot of that in storytelling is all driven around that human-to-human connection. Going all the way back to the cavemen, in which you're gathered around the campfire, telling a great story. You've got people that are fully leaning in, engaged, listening, and then it went over to cave paintings on walls, and then it moved over to tablets with the in Egypt. It's all about then visualizing things out and then bringing audience in to now co-create. And we're at an era now in which there's a term basically called created with, in which that content story is now being created with audience, with brands, with the storytellers. And the great stories are the ones that transcend 42 minutes, 22 minutes, 8 minutes, 3 minutes on a single screen and become story world, in which people become totally immersed in the story, mythology, the characters, the content, everything that goes around it. And that's where this converging world of screens, of platforms, makes such an interesting playground for storytelling. And so, Hulu being such an interesting playground, it's going to be interesting to see how Hulu expands out and moves into social platform and goes onto Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter to start engaging fans, building community, driving them back to a core destination to do larger storytelling in that format of television type format.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt again. You did a panel on transmedia, and where you talked specifically about this as regards to Lost and how they had built a community around it that far exceeded just sitting passively and watching something on television. And of course, the same thing can be said about HBO and Game of Thrones, which is something that those are the kinds of immersive engagements now way beyond watching television.
Yeah. And that's where I think you're starting to see the smart marketers embracing fandom and looking at that small percentage, whether it's 2%, 5%, 10% of audience, that choose to actively really engage and participate in storytelling. They're moving from being those massive passives, people that are sitting back on the couch and passively receiving story, to now actively engaging with and becoming part of story and helping to literally promote and market it. Some brands now are literally going out there and launching their brands off the backs of celebrities, influencers. Linda, you've done a ton of this stuff in identifying who those influencers and tastemakers are to help save marketing dollars, to help make a bigger cultural impact in the world than just spending dollars to get eyeballs to try to drive people back to stay.
Well, Linda, does that take you, I'm sorry, going to keep going. Does that take you even into? Everyone's talking right now about bringing in these people who are the big stars on YouTube, whether it's PewDiePie or some of the those. There seems to be a huge millennial shift there, and big companies bringing in.
Yeah, actually, I think that that does happen. I think what you're finding is that there is it's had limited success. And I think part of that is because a lot of the companies that they see sort of it's the right theory, right? Somebody's got a big following. How do we glom onto that? But they don't know what to do with them when they get them into video content that's longer than 3 minutes. And because what they try to do is then they try to take what worked in 3 minutes and make it work over 22. And it doesn't work that way. And so I think what you were saying is exactly right, Jesse, that you have to think about the world of media as an ecosystem. And that your experience on television is specific. Your experience online is specific. And what you do with a star, I mean, Bethany Moda might be the best example of putting her in a very different context on Dancing with the Stars than she appears on YouTube. Because why would I watch a 22-minute show that, as we discussed, is difficult to find when I can just go on and see a 3-minute clip that if I don't like, I can just go on and find another one really quickly. So I think that what media companies have to do with YouTube stars is recognize that it's not a one-to-one import when you cross platforms, that you have to create, just like ESPN doesn't play a game on every platform.
Oh, is that why so many of the networks are announcing that they're going to start a streaming channel? NBC just did it yesterday. And obviously Univision said they were going to do it a couple of months ago. And I mean, everybody seems to be jumping on that bandwagon.
Well, I mean, not to jump off of what Linda's point was here, though, it's not just YouTube, though. I mean, look at Snapchat. Snapchat is going to crush the space.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're doing 25 million unique people going into our story on a given day. That's bigger than what the Grammys did. That's bigger than what the Oscars did.
Well, the
every
reach
single
of the internet
day.
is bigger than television, potentially.
Somebody said last week in a panel, Snapchat would be the place where the next big television hit would be.
Oh, yeah.
And so everyone is, to your point, launching those streaming channels because they want to be where everyone is. And can you target them on a personal level? Absolutely.
It goes back to where you started a couple moments ago, and I'm going to borrow the phrase I heard from Dr. Jeffrey Cole, who a lot of people know from Annenberg, and he's great. He said, content is kinger than ever before. Because all the Snapchat, the OTTs, everything you're talking about, fandom, it starts, the core is the content.
Back to story.
And speaking of that,
you can't fake that.
And from our perspective, more in the sort of hardcore B2B side, we're even seeing our marketing partners set up studios. So again, it's storytelling in a thought leadership perspective in a different format to a different type of audience. There's some entertaining value, but it's less that. And as an example, we're working with Ford. They set up their own studio to really bring out the case studies, the expertise that they have, some of the exciting engineers that are women, that are millennials. They have this video content, and they're trying to really shape that and form that and then distribute that out through other platforms to engage, prospects and customers.
Yeah, it's very clear that that's the beginning step and the leading edge of it. Condé Nast is doing that with its own internal entertainment production group. So
and I
that's
think
an important
what
step.
Condé's doing is they're creating content as a publisher in the way that they would create content as a publisher for the audience that they know already exists coming to them. So, and then it could be sponsored or supported by a brand. I think the way that we look at it and what I see as an emerging business model is, again, the authenticity and the content being created by that brand, not necessarily by that publisher. The publisher then becomes a distribution, or again, another buzzword, an amplification mechanism to distribute that content out beyond just that single channel. So very nuanced, different approach.
Yeah, and that's the rub there. That's really smart. It's the brands that are doing it right are no longer borrowing equity. They're actually creating equity. So Red Bull Media House, huge opportunity for them. Their brand is media. Their brand is the storytelling of Red Bull. You're looking at Chipotle and what they did with Farmed and Dangerous. You're looking at GE and what they just did on Vivo with Nas doing these documentaries. They're creating the equity now, then they're trading their equity, and it's going to get distributed across different platforms telling their story.
And there's there's two things about that. One is that your advertisers can be your competition for content, for eyeballs, right? And that the audience really wants to understand what's good, right? Because with all this proliferation of content providers, you can bet that there's an infinite numbers, billions and billions and billions of pieces of content. You can bet that 99% of it's going to be mediocre, right? So if you aim to be in that 1% that rises above the pack, and yes, everyone wants to be innovative, but you really have to study, what is generally out there, and really kind of be counterintuitive in a way, because there's just going to be so. I talked to some multi-channel networks, and they're all excited about all the content they're creating for their advertisers, and I said, great, but are you adding to the noise, or are you actually creating something people want to watch?
Well, you know what? Let me ask you a question, and I think it'll. Speaking of noise, what color is that dress?
Okay, I thought it was black and blue.
Green.
I'm sorry, I thought it was white and gold.
It's green.
I don't see the black and blue. I don't see it. I don't see it. It's
green.
White and gold to me.
Right?
Why do I care? And why was that so huge? And what does that mean?
Want me to tell you?
I absolutely do.
So culturally, it was a thing. But really, it was a thing.
It was a thing.
It was really just like a thing. But what I think it actually says about our culture in terms of why it was a thing is a couple things. One is it's very inclusive. It's an image that everybody in the entire universe can look at and have an opinion on. You don't have to be a certain demo or a certain sensibility or whatever. So anybody, my mother could look at it, my kid could look at it, I can look at it. We can have all different opinions. I was actually surprised. I didn't even know people had different opinions of it. So, it's just one of those things that is just kind of fascinating. And one of the reasons it's fascinating, and I think, Peter, you mentioned it, is because we actually, in a world where we have so much information so readily at our fingertips, this culture is really becoming increasingly interested in science. And so, Julie, you mentioned the how-to and the making. Those things sort of understanding, like, why is it that people can see this differently? The science of it is really kind of fascinating to people right now, because everything, all the headlines and everything are just so kind of disposable. And things that are really true about our humanity. So this is weird, but I'm going to say that dress is about our humanity.
Well, it's funny because this dress was the big.
I was going to say it's really about the internet, which is all about cats and twos.
Of course, that's the surface. Yeah. The meaning, why something like this resonates in culture is because it reminds us, as digital as everything is, at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I know you're going to jump in, but at the end of the day, it's like anybody listen to Serial, it's the same thing. You come up with two different answers and nobody can prove that they're right. The truth is unattainable. And here there was science that could say actually, and there was the actual dress and the poor designer who got hammered with the thousands of emails in the press.
Yeah, I was just going to say the other two big stories last week, besides the dress, was Madonna falling backwards down the flight of stairs, and the llamas in the desert.
I love the llamas.
So I have no other comment.
Come on, the llamas were great.
Actually, this dress is the dress NATO moment that literally took over.
Actually, I think it was the moment that Tumblr popped its cherry.
Big time.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that we could keep going, and I think this is really fascinating. But I want to. There's a couple of minutes left for questions, sir, over there.
Sure. So money's going to move from broadcast to digital because the market's getting even more fragmented than we ever thought it could be. So addressing native and contextual, how does that scale? And what are media buyers thinking? And how are they going to spend the money?
It's a lot of questions.
Well, I can't talk about native and contextual, but I can say that TV money is going to flow into a redefined TV, and I'll say it's redefining. We're in the process of redefining TV. Everything that was analog will be served through an IP address. The notion of C3, C7, DVR ads will go the way of the buggy whip when everything is dynamically ad inserted. So you'll recapture all of those rating points. So all that money will flow to a redefining kind of television environment. As far as native goes, I think you'll see the rise of more branded content and branded commercials to help fill a a challenge that marketers have with the conventional ad units that get ignored. That's Exhibit A was Geico or Farmed and Dangerous from Chipotle. So that's what I'm seeing.
And you got to also keep in mind too that as much as we're talking about the massive moves that are about to happen, there's still a couple years out. So knowing TV infrastructure, only about 40% of all the TV media companies have the ability to really do dynamic ad insertion across TVE and VOD. 60% don't even have that capability yet. So everyone's trying to gear up towards programmatic and how they're going to automate everything, but yet the full infrastructure to fully deploy across that 100% isn't there yet. I guess the currency isn't there yet. You've got Nielsen, who's been saying they're going to be doing OCR fully deployed across every screen for a year and a half. Is that going to happen this year? Who knows? Are they going to be the currency that everyone still trades on? Probably not, but they're going to be a very important one. They're going to be like the kind of the $2 gold coin compared to some other currencies that are going to start coming in.
Yeah, it'll be a creep, not a massive shift.
Exactly.
And the creep has started with companies like us, all the TV.coms with their platforms, and then you see all the guys trying to take TV replacement dollars, whether it's YouTube, which is a monster, or and Facebook's trying to do it with their video product. Twitter's trying. Everyone with a camera is trying to take some TV dollars.
Yeah, and you can still be a massively successful brand without ever doing TV.
Of course.
We have time for one more question, if you've got it. Okay, all the way back there.
I actually had a question. It might be a fit, but just with regards to, you mentioned the 11-263 and these big name stars that you have, J.K. Abrams and James Franco. It's actually pretty appropriate that James Franco is in that because it's actually connected to, what did Hulu learn from the interview and the distribution of that movie, and then, reading into, there is a market for big movies online or, in less orthodox avenues that people are going to pay for, and, is the movie theater the dinosaur, and even more, is Netflix and Hulu sort of the future 21st Century Fox and Sony Pictures of the world?
There's a lot of questions in there. I think the first thing we learned about the interview, and the reason we didn't rush to say, well, we'll show it, is because we had never suffered an attack like Sony had, and YouTube had. So they said, no, we're used to this kind of technological challenge, so we'll see what happens. I think it's just another bright, shining example of entertainment being redefined, and the biggest barrier to the redefinition process is the legacy windowing of content, and because of the hack, it just blew up windowing for the interview. It gave everybody the freedom to say, you know what, we'll put it here, we'll put it there, we'll put it in the other place because we can, and they enjoyed a lot of attention for the worst reasons, but they also had a lot of viewership on a multi-platform. So I think you'll see a willingness to experiment more than ever before. When it comes to the question of, is Hulu and Netflix, Amazon, are we the future studios? I think we're just we're all driving up demand for quality content, and it's never been more robust time to be a screenwriter or an actor or what have you. So it's the demand for original content, good original content, is higher than ever before, and the challenge to find audiences for that will become even more interesting to watch.
Thank you very much for being here today. I want to thank Jessica Sibley, Peter Naylor, Julie Hansen, Linda Ong, and Jesse Redness specifically for getting the word programmatic into the conversation.
Nice job.